Good morning. We're here today to answer questions about findings in a report that we are releasing on the Department of Education. Just 3 months after signing a contract with Odyssey to administer the state's school vouchers program, the department then amended the contract to double the cost to taxpayers with no additional obligations on Odyssey. No justification for doubling the cost to taxpayers has been provided to date. In addition to that, the department also did not follow their own procedures and policies for their process of amending a contract. They did not, in fact, do that. They did not show any indication of having done that until just a couple of weeks ago, despite the fact that we first asked for these documents back in December of last year. This all comes after the original contract itself also added $100,000 in costs to taxpayers annually, beyond what Odyssey had requested in their bid for a standalone system fee. Finally, Odyssey also claimed to have an office open in Iowa if selected, and they claimed this building, the Iowa State Capitol building, as their temporary office location in the state of Iowa. There appears to be no legitimate means for them to make this claim, but it also doesn't appear that the Department of Education did anything to question it at all. In a second finding, we also located $840,672 that the department allocated to paraeducator programs when the Elementary and Secondary School Education Act actually limited those funds to being used for school leaders. We found these to be a questioned cost, and we recommended that the department contact the United States Department of Education to resolve the issue. I also want to give credit to our audit staff for their good work and diligence on this report. Again, bottom line here is the cost to Iowa taxpayers for the administration of the school vouchers program has doubled with no apparent justification for it whatsoever. This was a contract that was signed just a couple of months after the original contract was signed, and still today, there has been no justification provided whatsoever. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, Auditor Sand, I think the question that we're kind of asking is what took so long to have this notice and get these funds?
We asked for this documentation back in December. It wasn't provided until pretty recently here. That's inappropriate. When the auditor is auditing and asks for material, it should be provided. That's what Iowa law says. And we were doing this all in accordance with the law and with auditing standards.
What, do you have any metrics about the exact numbers that are doubled now that taxpayer?
So we used the Legislative Services Agency's estimates when calculating how much of an increase this is going to be. That's a nonpartisan entity. They have scored the bill. They're right here in the Capitol building. We actually, if you look at the actual numbers though that have come out over the last year and a half, think that the idea that this is going to double costs to taxpayers is actually an estimate that's on the conservative side of things. So for example, the governor recently announced that 30,000 students were approved for ESAs in this upcoming year. If 30,000 receive the full voucher, then actually that would cost for that fiscal year an additional $587,000, when our report only estimates an additional $391,000. So our report actually is on the conservative side here in suggesting that doubling over the next 3 fiscal years over the course of the contract is probably on the low end.
How do you expect this playing out in the future? Where are you going to be?
This is a big piece of what we do, right? We do our audit work, we review the numbers, we review the contracts, we look for waste, fraud, and abuse, and when we identify it, we let the public know. That is our job. Our capacity to do more of that obviously has recently been limited by the state passing legislation that makes it harder for us to find documentation. But where we go from there will depend on what additional facts develop.
And this, I'm assuming,
Look, anytime an auditor asks for documentation and is told that they can't have it or is given the runaround for 6 months, it should raise red flags. That's exactly what it did for our staff. And I want to give, again, credit to our staff that worked on this report, who identified this issue. This is exactly what we were supposed to be doing, right? And I do specifically want to point out this new contract was amended in July, just after the beginning of the new fiscal year. The auditing standards actually require us to look at what happens in between the end of the fiscal year and when we issue our report. So we don't just sort of say anything after the end of the fiscal year we're not interested in. We have an ethical obligation to review that. That's under the Government Auditing Standards 6.01 and the Statement on Auditing Standards 560.05. Par for the course, we're doing our job.
And just what would your message be to Iowa taxpayers?
I think Iowa taxpayers just need to know this information, right? We're the taxpayers' watchdog. We look for waste, fraud, and abuse, and when we find it, we bark. We're barking today.